We're joined this week by Labor MP Ed Husic, the former New South Wales Liberal leader Kerry Chikarovski, Immigration Minister in the Keating government Jerry Hand, and the Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg. Just to pick up on what Jerry Hand was saying before the break about regional cooperation here. Clearly, Indonesia is key to any sort of regional framework. That's where the bulk of the boats are coming from. And Josh Frydenberg, if the coalition had its way, that's where we'd turn them back to. Why can't we get Indonesia to agree to either stop the boats leaving or to take them back?
Well, I think we can do better with Indonesia in terms of our diplomatic effort there. I mean, we are the co-chair of the Bali process, a 46-nation process with Indonesia. It was set up by Alexander Downer and Philip Ruddock in 2002 and was pretty successful in sharing intelligence and information and trying to build competency around border protection.
So how do you get them to stop boats leaving and to take them back?
Well, I think you've got to provide more support to them, and I think you've got to engage them, better at a diplomatic level, and that's where Bob Carr needs to be standing up and doing a bit more.
So if you were Foreign Minister, if you're in Bob Carr's shoes,
I'd be over there in Jakarta making this absolutely priority number one. I mean, Tony Abbott, to his credit...
What would you say to them? What would you say to them that's going to be different to what successive ministers have said?
I would say, we are one of your biggest donors to your country, and we supply over $500 million a year to Indonesia. Right? We are
so if you don't stop the boats, we'll pull them up.
No, I'm saying I'm just putting on the table the level of friendship and intimacy in that relationship. We are a good neighbour, as Kerry said.
Reminding them of the foreign aid we provide.
And reminding them what a hot button issue this in Australia is. And so I think, it's in Indonesia's interest.
So this is hurting us politically back home, guys.
It's not political.
And we're giving you a lot of money. You've got to stop these boats.
Well, can I just say, it's also damaging to Indonesia. I mean, the Houston report said 90% of people since 2010 have effectively come through Indonesia. I mean, 75% of people who come by boat to this country are coming from just 3 countries, Iran, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka. So Indonesia can do much better, and we can do better.
So the deputy sheriff mentality still lives on in the coalition.
Why is that a deputy sheriff?
Well, by referring to their aid, hang on a second.
I think that's a pretty important point. You're confident you will convince Indonesia to stop the boats and take them back by raising our foreign aid and by pointing out that this is a problem in Australia.
By pointing out the strength of our relationship, our history, through the years, and particularly starting with the Bali process.
Everyone's done that, sure.
But no.
You don't think Bob Carr's reminded them of our history of relationship?
I think Bob Carr and Kevin Rudd have taken the eye off the Bali process. I mean, don't forget we had this huge standoff with them over the Oceanic Viking. Don't forget we failed to tell them in advance that we were going to stop live animal exports.
We've taken the relationship. You'd be there more often.
And Tony Abbott, to his credit, David, has said...
More lunches and dinners.
He has said Jakarta first, before Geneva. That's what he said. He's going to make it an absolute priority, and so is Julie Bishop, and they'll do a lot better than
he has recently.
Is that going to work?
No.
Spending more time there, talking about foreign aid and the history of the relationship.
I think I've told you before. Once when I was going over there and we were having boats arriving here, I had a press conference, doorstop I think you call them these days, and I was surrounded by all these journalists. They all said, "What are you going to tell the Indonesians?" I said, "About what? About the boats?" And I said, "I'm not going to tell the Indonesians anything. I'm going to go over there and I'm going to discuss the situation with them." Now, the problem with raising aid and all these other things, it's Big Brother. The Indonesians are very, very proud people, and so they should be. And the way to get them offside is to go and say, "Now listen here, if you don't toe the line, we give you a bit of money, blah, blah." Well, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, "So what?"
You say this is a shared,
you don't approach it like problem. That. No, I'm just saying, you don't approach people by saying, "Look, you behave yourself now, you come on side with us, we give you all this money, and if you don't do the right thing, we'll have to go back."
Why not, though? Why not? Just to explore this. Why not? Why can't we?
Because neighbours never love it when you remind them that they have money from you. I mean, it's a pretty simple proposition. I just think that is not the way to go about it. And we do have an active framework.
The answer is to go and discuss the situation as it exists on a regional basis, the same thing that was done under the Comprehensive Plan of Action.
Sorry, the other thing, can I just say, but hang on a second, but the other thing to do, you asked me what to do, what not to do, is to go into the region as your leader has multiple occasions, either bagging out Malaysia and claiming that they are a heinous regime, which he's had to change, mind you. I never thought I'd have to use the word nuanced and Tony Abbott in the same sentence, but he started changing it this week. And I know Julie Bishop is there. And going and lecturing China and talking about Indonesia.
But what would you do? What would you do to get Indonesia to do more?
Well, because the work that we've been doing, just as Jerry's been saying, the work that we've done with a country that has a track record of repatriation differentiation in the form of Malaysia, who we work closely with.
So you
and the work that we
change
do
nothing.
with
You do
with
exactly the same
Indonesia,
thing we've been doing.
Which is the definition of
I don't
insanity,
agree.
isn't it? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Well, I'll tell you what's insane. Bagging out your neighbours and expecting them to help out, Kerry, is certainly
What different can be
insane.
done?
It's wrong to say that. The Bali group, I mean, God, what is there, 40 nations, NGOs and
You're not going to
UN
achieve
bodies.
anything in a meeting of 40 people.
How are you ever going to get anything to work at that large group, which is of this type of situation that we're confronted with Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia and Thailand? The model is there.
And
The comprehensive plan of action was negotiated between a small group of countries. We didn't have Austria and Germany and England and all these other countries sitting in there muddying the waters like the Europeans do.
This is a regional
No, they do, and you know that. What we need to do is sit down with the people who are directly involved, do what Houston says here, and develop a strategy.
But the point is,
Because-
Indonesia's not interested.
Who says that?
You see, if you have a good relationship with
Yeah.
the president, I mean, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono is the president of Indonesia. He has a very positive disposition to Australia.
That's right.
Julia Gillard should be over there in Jakarta, meeting with him.
Threatening to pull foreign aid.
No, and talking to him about the whole suite of measures that we can take together to stop this, because this is Indonesia's problem as well.
And isn't that the root problem? I mean, the root problem is that what we should be doing is sitting down with Indonesia and saying, not telling Indonesia, not threatening Indonesia,
don't make it
but
glass.
saying to Indonesia, look, the problem you have is our shared problem, and what is your solution? Is your solution, and I hate to be radical here, but is your solution if we agreed, for example, that we might actually increase the refugee intake beyond 20,000, we might make it even higher. We might speak to Canada and New Zealand about making sure that they increase their
Carrots
refugees.
rather than sticks.
I mean, if we were to, and look, and as I said, I'm not a policy person in Canberra, so I can say these things, but it seems to me that there would be general agreement, particularly amongst the populations of, those countries, that if we were able to negotiate with the Indonesians a higher refugee intake, which they then knew we were guaranteeing to take, they would perhaps sit down and say, OK, well, we'll be a bit more stringent about making sure the boats don't
Well,
leave.
it's great because that's what the Houston report says.
It does. Skip to
And also, the other thing I love is the suggestion that we should talk more with Indonesia. That is already happening. And the other thing is too, if you guys are, you should
had
lead the
5
way.
years.
You should totally lead the way,
Ed, you've
because
had
your
5 years in
approach,
government.
your
You've had
approach to
5 years in
convincing the
government.
Indonesians to agree to
You've had
tow
5
back,
years. You've had 5
your
years.
approach to getting them to agree to tow back, how's that going? And by the way,
We're not
whenever
in
they had
government.
their campaign material, I never saw the asterisk at the end of the campaign promise that said, we'll turn back the boats if it's safe to do so,
I
if
don't think
Indonesia
That's not
agrees
that,
to it.
yeah, make a straw
Well,
man.
okay, just on the towback of boats, and again, Josh, to you,
Yeah.
this is still a key plank of the coalition's policy and the policy differentiation to Labor, given what you've said about the need to have a friendlier dialogue with Indonesia.
Absolutely.
And President Yudhoyono in
More
particular.
active dialogue.
How then, and do you need Indonesia's cooperation to turn back the boats? Because he doesn't like it.
Well, we've done it before. I mean, this is
The
what we're
question is, do you need Indonesia's cooperation or not?
Well, I don't. I think you need to give direct.
It's probably a question you're going to have to answer.
No, I think you give direct instructions to our navy to say you take the decision if it's safe
Yeah,
to
well,
do
that's
so.
self-evident.
Turn a
But
boat.
what about Indonesia?
You don't need
Do you need
Indonesia. No, you don't. This is a decision that Australia can take.
Right.
And I think
So in practice then, you tell the Navy, turn them back.
When it's safe to do
Indonesia's
so.
not
When it's safe
cooperating.
to
when
do
it's safe
so.
to do so.
And it's been done
what
before.
happens? They go back to an Indonesian port, and if Indonesia's not cooperating, what's going to happen?
Well, hopefully those people will then go back to where they came, and at the end of the day, you are hoping
They're taking them back to a country that's not a signatory to the convention.
Hang on,
An
you are
Australian Navy
hoping
vessel.
That's okay.
An
You are
Australian-
hoping that this is a deterrent. We're talking about deterrence.
Yeah, but
in place
okay,
here.
but just in practice, an Australian
You get
Navy
tough, my
vessel,
friend,
an
here.
Australian Navy vessel enters Indonesian waters,
Yeah.
takes them back to the port they left from, Merak or somewhere in Java. Indonesia's not cooperating. What actually happens? Do the Australian Navy personnel force them off the boat?
Well, that's not what has happened in the past, and the point is, it has worked in the past. I mean, David, you can go through and
explain to me how
you
it
can
does
walk
work.
through a whole lot of hypotheticals here and say, well, what happens if Malaysia starts storming the boat, Indonesians start storming the boat, or what happens if the people start scuttling the boat or whatever? Right. The point is, we have done it successfully half a dozen times when John Howard was in
complicating
government.
The Indonesians don't want to do it again.
Yeah, no, but the Indonesians weren't doing it. We were doing it.
No, but they've
right?
said
I mean,
that
that's
they
the
don't
point.
Surely the point is you've got to get Indonesia to cooperate with this. Now, let me read you what the Houston Committee said about this. It said turning around vessels carrying asylum seekers to Australia can be operationally achieved and can constitute an effective disincentive to such ventures, but only in circumstances where a range of operational, safety of life, diplomatic and legal conditions are met. Ed Husick, why is Labor so adamant that you can't do this? The Houston Committee lays out there how this can be done.
And you also, I think is worth, if I can say, put in there that the Houston report also says that we're, a source country or a country that you would want to, basically enact this with, Indonesia doesn't want to do it. And the key is to try and get regional cooperation on other measures. Then why invest so much time and create the agitation
Why not have
on this?
I'm just saying,
as
why not have a
opposed to-
conversation
and that's
with
what-
Indonesia about
but
this?
this is the other part of what the Houston report says, David. And it's effectively saying, why go down the path of where you have so much resistance on this issue of towback instead of investing more credible, more productive time in the regional approach which needs to be done.
But surely
Full
this
credit-
is part of it. I mean,
full
let me
credit-
read
well,
from-
let me just
this
say
is what
full
it says.
credit
It
to you,
says constitute an effective disincentive.
And that's it. I mean, this
And
is
even
part-
the Immigration Department agrees.
This is what,
Where
and this is a part. This is a whole.
where it's
This is a
possible
whole
to do it.
range of measures, and this is one of them. And that's
Where
what
the
they're
rubber
saying.
hits the road.
So
Hang on a second. So, hang on a second. Let me just go. Wait a second. Hang on a second, Kerry. So, where there are these huge difficulties
Government's agreed to it.
mid-ocean to do this, the other government
that's-
doesn't want to do it. You feel that that's more preferable than us having our agreement with Malaysia, where we don't have to go through that rigmarole.
But just back on this, though, if the
It
Houston
clearly says
Committee
where it's
says
operationally
where it's
possible.
operationally possible, it's effective to do it, given the Labor Party's now embraced this report, you've embraced this policy.
That's right.
Have you embraced it? Is it your policy?
Look, there's a lot of elements to this. A lot of elements to what I've said previously. For example, Nauru. My words on the record in terms of Nauru. Is
Forget
it's
that
just
for a
Christmas
minute.
island.
Labor's
No, but hang on, I'm getting to the point.
all of the
My
regulations.
about Nauru is it was just effectively the Christmas island of the Pacific. But the point has been, we have an expert group that has made recommendations
Are you gonna accept
that we
this
need to work through.
Will you accept it or
But there are a
work
lot
through
of
it?
caveats.
Are you
There are a
gonna
lot of
accept that one?
caveats. There are a lot of caveats to that. Well, are you going to accept Malaysia?
Okay,
Well,
but
and-
Ed,
but Ed, hold on.
you're
Ed,
dodging
you-
on this. You're dodging.
Ed,
Do you
Ed,
accept this
I
recommendation
just said,
or not?
I just made the point. There are a lot of caveats to this working.
Oh, right.
Oh,
there
that's
are a lot of
maybe. I think
caveats
that's a
to
maybe. Jerry, what do you think?
So you're leaving it
You
open?
can't be going. You can't be going, Josh, for
I'll
only
go-
accepting part of it, and then say you're only
I'll
going to
go
accept
back
part
to
of it.
where I
That doesn't
began.
make
I think
sense.
we're getting.
I'll go back to where I began. The report says more work needs to be done on the Malaysia exercise, and if that's done to a satisfactory level, Malaysia could work. The report also says, and I mean, I might as well be disliked by everybody here tonight. The report also says that bilateral arrangements can be put in place and the boats can be turned around if all the dominoes are lined up.
Caveat, caveat,
Right.
caveat, which
Now,
is what I was saying.
in both cases, what's been interesting this week is sitting there watching this sideshow and debate is Malaysia's doomed, right? Turning back the boats is doomed. The report doesn't say that about either of them. That's the problem with this backbenchers jumping up and reading out prepared quotes from this person and that person, handed to them by the whippers if they go in to speak, not having a clue what they're saying, half them.
Well, in defence of our two guests tonight, they don't have any.
No, but I mean, the point is, both these contentious issues have been referred to by the working group and have said, if this happens and that happens, this could be a goer.
This is my point. I mean, there are so many caveats that you need to go through to make that
but
that
you've got to accept that if you accept the 22 recommendations as a government.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
I agree with
well,
that
the
point.
government's got to try and get the 22 recommendations.
That's right. So the government has to commit to making
and
them
the
work. That was the whole
opposition's
point of it.
No, it's not just the government, Kerry. I think there are a lot of people in Parliament that have to make this work with respect.
Yeah, well, it looks like Parliament is agreeing on something, and the middle ground, I think, is what we're
Except for the Greens.
aiming for here. Believe it or not, there are other issues I want to talk about. We're going to take a break, talk about the asylum seeker of a different kind, Julian Assange. Stay with us. You're watching The Nation. We're joined this week by Labor MP Ed Husic, former Liberal leader in New South Wales Kerry Chikarovsky, former Labor Immigration Minister Jerry Hand, and Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg. I want to look at Julian Assange. We'll find out tonight whether Ecuador are going to give him asylum. He's been there, I think, 56 days in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, worried about moves to extradite him to Sweden, where he's facing sexual assault matters. His real fear is that if he's extradited there, he can then be extradited to the United States. He fears the Americans want him on fairly serious, potentially terrorism charges over the WikiLeaks cables. The British police have been around the Ecuadorian embassy through much of the day. They haven't gone in yet, but they've made it clear to Ecuador that they have the legal right to do so and take him. Jerry Hand, first to you on this. It's a tricky thing, though, isn't it, going into a foreign power's embassy? It's meant to be sovereign soil.
Well, the British police would have got legal advice, I suppose, and it may be a fact that they can. But as a layperson, I always thought that if you're in an embassy, you were pretty safe. I've not heard of this. I've not heard of this ever
It's an
happening.
act that passed in 1987, which said that if a diplomatic mission is not acting
As
in
an
accordance-
After the shooting
if they declare it's no longer an embassy,
Yes.
that it's harbouring
It
criminal,
revokes its diplomatic
and they
immunity.
revoke it as an embassy and say that's no longer an embassy.
I
It's
think
just
it was
a
the
flat
Libyan or the
in
Iranian
Knightsbridge.
embassy. There was a shooting in London, and I think they changed the. You're right. I think there was.
But still,
It's 1987.
it would be
It'd be a dramatic act.
a pretty bold move, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, look, they could also try to arrest him if he does leave the embassy for breaching the bail conditions, which he's done. But look, my personal view is he's got to face the music in Sweden. These are serious sexual
that's true.
offences related
That's true.
that he charges that he's facing, and he should go and face that. And
His defenders say that he could answer all these questions right where he is if the Swedish want to come and talk to him there.
Why? But what's he got to hide? Why can't he go to Sweden and face the music there? I mean, that's what I think should happen. I mean, the American ambassador to Australia, Ambassador Bleisch, has said this is an issue between Sweden and Julian Assange, and I just think, hopefully Ecuador doesn't grant him that asylum and he can go to Sweden.
I actually met with one of his lawyers some time ago, and her explanation was that it's not the charges in Sweden, and this is what everyone's saying.
And I don't even know if he is facing charges.
Well,
he's wanted for questioning.
And her explanation was that he's not concerned about going to Sweden to talk to the Swedish authorities or to face charges. That's not his issue. But he cannot get an assurance from anyone that the Swedish authorities won't hand him over to the Americans. Now, I would have thought this could all be very easily resolved if the Americans said they didn't want him. But they clearly aren't prepared to do that. And while they're not prepared to do that, I don't, whether he's in the Ecuadorian embassy or whatever, I can understand his nervousness, because there was an American lawyer on TV earlier tonight, because if he is arrested by the Americans and he's not arrested under the normal, or extradited, he's not extradited under the normal conditions of a criminal being taken back to the States. He will be extradited under their terrorist extradition laws, and that raises a whole lot of other issues about his right to representation and how long he can kept. So, I mean, I'm not an Assange fan at all. I am a process fan, a legal process fan, and I do think that that's important.
So you think he's got a case for holding out and doing what he can to avoid being extradited to Sweden?
I think he's got a case for saying, if I am to go to Sweden, I would like to have an assurance that if I'm extradited to the States, then I will be extradited under the normal laws of extradition, and I won't be treated as a terrorist.
The UK Supreme Court has already ruled on it. I mean, the UK Supreme Court has said that he can be extradited.
That's right.
I mean,
To the United
Sweden.
To Sweden.
Sweden.
No. I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing with.
Sure.
What I'm suggesting is I think he should go to Sweden. I don't have a problem with him going to Sweden. It's whether the Americans can give an assurance, or whether we should, and whether it's our government or someone should give an assurance which says if they seek to extradite him. No. If we can ask the Americans for that assurance.
Should Australia be doing that? Should Australia be...
I understand that we
Nicola
provide...
Roxon, the Attorney General, says she's spoken to the Americans. They have no plans.
That's right.
They have no
That's what's
plans.
exactly been said.
What does that mean? They're
And
not ruling
the
it out.
reality is the Australian government helps people overseas who are in all sorts of different problems, have all sorts of different issues. I'm not entirely sure what they could do to persuade the Americans, but, I think a public statement by the United States saying that if we were to extradite, it would be on these conditions. That, I think, is probably an appropriate way to go.
At which point he'd still have reservations at any rate.
Well,
I'm not a fan.
indeed.
Look, I'm not.
As I said, I'm not a fan, Ed. I'm not defending him at all.
Sorry, Kerry, I'm definitely not suggesting that's not. If that's come out that way, I don't mean it that way. I'm certainly no means supportive of what he did, but I don't think he should die for that. Like, I'm not a fan of...
What are you talking about, dying?
Well, in terms of what's been suggested by some, that he be put to death in the United States, which has been said and being put to the death penalty.
You're going on basis of somebody saying that. Who in authority has said that he's going to be put to death? I mean, you're jumping through so many hoops that are not even there. Look, the guy is facing serious sexual offences, I understand it, or to be questioned about the allegation of such offences in Sweden. Now, Sweden is a democratic country. The UK has an extradition treaty with Sweden, and the UK Supreme Court has ruled on this matter. And now you've got Ecuador, a left-wing president in Ecuador, Rafael Correa, who ironically, by the way, Ed, has been caught out for suppressing the media, is now backing Julian Assange. One of the great ironies is saying, well, let's give this guy asylum.
The language from Ecuador seemed to suggest they are going to grant him asylum, but as you say, he could well get pinged on the footpath as soon as he tries to leave the building.
Well, that's certainly what the police have indicated by having the police there. I mean, I thought the funniest comment I've heard about all day was someone advocating that you should get 3,000 people with Julian Assange masks on and have them surround the place, and then they won't know whether he's gone or not. But I mean, it is quite clear that even if they do say yes, so they can have asylum, that the British aren't going to let him leave that building for a very long period of time.
We'll see what happens.
The precedent, though, is setting a precedent. And I mean, if you give someone a smack in the mouth, as the Brits maybe are going to do to the people in this embassy, someone will give them one back. And that's the problem with this. And it needs to be very carefully addressed. Carefully addressed, or else it could be, set a precedent.
I'm sure they're aware of that, though.
I'd be very surprised.
But I'm just saying, it is something that most people in the community think, well, you go to an embassy, you're pretty safe. But there was that incident. You're right there, and that law changed, I remember now.
You'd be surprised if they stormed the building. I mean, I don't think anybody would expect that.
I agree with that. Final issue, the government's victory in the High Court this week. You guys haven't had a great run in the High Court in the last year or two with the Malaysian solution, the school chaplains program. But on plain packets for cigarettes, a victory, a defeat for the tobacco companies who were challenging this, fighting this. Josh Frydenberg, the coalition were a bit lukewarm on the idea.
That's not true.
Initially?
That's not true.
Took you a while to get there.
That's not true.
Took you a while to get there.
First, let's put some facts on the table,
Sure.
David.
Yep.
If you're going to make an allegation like that, let's hear the facts. Firstly, we supported the legislation. So I welcome the High Court decision. I think this is fantastic. I mean, 15,000 people in Australia die every year as a result of tobacco-related illnesses. It's cost the economy $30 billion. I mean, half of our Aboriginal Indigenous population smokes. This is not good enough. We need to do more. So I welcome this High Court decision. Under Tony Abbott's time as a health minister, he had the most rapid decrease in the number of people over the age of 14 smoking, down to 16.6% of the population. So we actually Tony introduced those graphic warnings, the 90% on the back and 30% on the front of the lung and all that sort of thing. That's what Tony Abbott introduced. So our record is very strong on this.
There are
couldn't be
some, there are
gracious
some-
today on it, though.
Yeah, there are some of your colleagues
I welcome this.
who were.
I agree.
No,
There are some
absolutely.
of
I
your
get
colleagues
that
though,
from
who
you.
were concerned about this intellectual property issue. About, I mean, you've got to acknowledge there were some concerns about this.
There's always some issues. I mean, Nicola Roxon was writing to tobacco companies in 2005 asking for money. I mean, so seriously, now she's out there as the Attorney General
you guys
championing the case. I mean, come on, you know. What?
Which party still receives donations from tobacco companies?
Well, Mark Latham banned tobacco donations in 2004 and in 2005.
Is that
Nicola
all
was
we needed
writing
was a
letters.
silence a
So,
few
I mean,
months
I don't
ago,
know what the
Josh.
Labor
All
Party
we needed was a silence
Given
a
your
few
heartfelt
months ago.
views there on reducing smoking.
My personal opinion?
Is it an embarrassment
My
for the Liberal
personal
Party?
No, it's not an embarrassment for the Liberal Party. Anyone, you know, if tobacco companies want to donate to the Liberal Party, well, that's an issue for the administrative wing. My personal view, I wouldn't like to take money from tobacco companies,
And
but
have you made that view clear to them?
yeah,
doing
I'm
it
sure
right now.
I've made it very clear on national television.
Gary Chigarovsky?
But I'm not the
What do you think
decision
about the Liberal Party
maker.
taking money from tobacco.
Well, look, I need to declare myself as an ex-smoker a very, very, very long time ago when I was at uni, so that's ancient history. So I'm very delighted with the High Court decision because I think anything we can do to dissuade people from either taking it up or continuing it is probably a good
And
thing.
it's kids we're talking about
Yeah,
particularly.
and I'm not,
Absolutely.
and I'm not
Please,
entirely
Gary.
sure. I'm not entirely sure that
Police
it's going to
state.
do anything for people who actually smoke because I think they'll still go in and ask for.
No, but it's not
$100
designed to.
Targeting
No, no,
kids,
and
the pretty packets and all of that.
And look, and I agree with that. Personally, it was interesting that when I was leaving Parliament, or when I'd left Parliament, and people said, you know, there's things you might be interested in doing. You know, obviously they talk about a whole lot of things, and I said, don't talk to me about anything to do with a cigarette company. And I say that as the daughter of a man who worked for WD&HO Wills many years ago. I just think it's, for me personally, I wouldn't be taking money, I wouldn't work for them. I'm sure there's lots of very good people in those companies, very nice people, but I actually think that we have an obligation to the health of the nation and particularly
Jerry Hand is someone who's smoked off and on over the years.
A lot of them. Loved them.
still doing it.
Since the birth of the baby,
I was going to say,
There you
you
go.
can't admit it in case your wife hears you.
I'm looking for a reason to start again. Don't worry.
You're about a month off the ciggies, I understand.
I've had about 8 months.
8 months. 8 months.
What's
Okay.
your view of this?
Yeah, is this going to work? Would this affect you at all?
Well, I mean, I know cigarettes can, in some situations, cause people illness. I know that.
In some situations.
I'm a bit like a colleague here. I come from a tobacconist family, cigarette wholesaler family, Wills, Rothmans, Philip Morris. I smoked my head off. I'm a fair age. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going all right.
He's just become a dad.
It didn't do me any harm.
Well,
This all started, David.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little interesting story. It started one day in the cabinet. Gareth had been on a plane. He'd been to England, and he sat next to an American who was smoking a cigar, and it drove Gareth berserk. On the other side of the table was Paul. Paul hated Bob smoking cigars, right? So we're all out, all the smokers were out in the ante-room having a smoke. And we get called back in to have a vote. Anyway, somebody said, geez, Gareth, we can't let that happen. Let's ban smoking on planes. And next minute was the vote in the cabinet. Out they come, they made the decision. Button and me and a few others all protested. I moved an amendment and said, well, we'll stop drinks being served on the plane. Well, we couldn't do that. Alcohol's okay, but cigarettes is no good. So we banned smoking on aeroplanes. Then for the next week, they all run around and said, well, we've got to find a reason to do this, so they come up with the health argument.
that's a great yarn.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's a
Jerry,
great-
congratulations.
that's-
What an outstanding thing that you were not responsible for, but...
I voted
And it's not often people shake hands over this table.
But let me take it a step further. Ed Hughes, get finally on this to you, right? If it's such a bad thing, and we've established that it is.
doesn't do you any good, by
It
the
doesn't do you any good. You get plain packets, you got to stop everything. Why not ban the things altogether?
Well, I mean, certainly what we've been trying to do, and there have been people that go through that, and we've gone through exercises of prohibition in other countries. But the great thing about this, and I think Tanya Plibersek described it as getting rid of mobile billboards, attracting people to take up this habit, and we have successfully over 25 years halved the number of people that take up the smoking habit, and it is important to reduce that even further.
No need to ban it.
Well, it's difficult to go through the prohibition path, but to put those disincentives in place, I think is really important. I think this has been a very important, a great move. I mean, I'm not a smoker, but never attracted to the notion of smoking. But certainly, I think this has been fantastic.
On that note, we're going to have to wrap things up. We're right out of time. Ed Husic, Kerry Chikarovsky, Jerry Hand, Josh Frydenberg. Great to talk to you all this week. Thanks. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your company as well. We'll be back same time next week. See you then.